Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Aubrey Gallegos. I'm the programs manager for the Good Meat Project. I'm also a farmer. I raise grass-fed lamb and pastured poultry in Southeast Washington. And I'm joined today by my amazing colleague, Meredith Rose, who's our programs coordinator. Meredith, you want to wave? Say hi. Yeah. So Meredith is our programs coordinator. She will be running the chat. She's doing a lot of the behind the scenes. Many of you have probably emailed with Meredith. And I'm really excited to introduce our lowdown topic. This is one we haven't done before, and in many ways it feels long overdue. So today we're getting a butcher and a farmer's perspective on how management decisions made on the farm actually show up in the meat. This is a big topic. There's a lot of different directions we can go in. We could spend days on just one meat type. So we're going to start with some preloaded questions, but we really want to let you all guide the conversation if there are burning questions that you have that can help you with your management decisions on the farm today, or just questions you have about butchery in general. Feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll get to as many of them as we can in the next hour. And just a reminder for those of you who are new here, these lowdowns are Good Meat Project's peer-to-peer speaker series. They're designed to help farmers, ranchers, butchers, and chefs learn from and with each other to drive profitability and sustainability in a system that's really often stacked against us. So we design these to be conversational. We want you to have a chance to get your specific questions answered. And if you have a moment, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know who's here. You can say your name, where you're calling in from, what you raise or sell. And then we have a few simple community agreements for every lowdown, which really just boil down to be kind, be open. We're just here to support each other and connect with one another. Great. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests. I want to get right into this because we have so much that we can talk about here. So we have a pretty cool setup today in that we have, as I mentioned, both a farmer and a butcher here for this conversation, and they actually work together. So Thomas Coss is the butcher at Carnation Farms in Carnation, Washington. And Alex, I forgot to make sure I have your last name right, so correct me if I get it wrong, but Alex Hagieptros?
Hagieptros.
Hagieptros. Okay, thank you. Is the livestock manager. Carnation Farms is a pretty special place. It's a hub for regenerative agriculture. They're over on the west side of Washington. They do education, community building. They sell their own meat and produce. They host butchery classes, farming workshops, dinners, cooking classes. They host the James Beard Foundation Boot Camp for Policy and Change, and much more. So we're really appreciate you both being here today and excited to talk about butchery and meat quality from your perspectives. So I'm going to start just with a quick little intro question. If you can each just tell us a little bit about what you specifically do at Carnation, since you have a bit of a unique setup. Alex, will you start us off?
Absolutely. So I'm Alex. I'm the livestock manager here at the farm, and that means I manage all of our livestock. We have a finishing beef operation. We background and finish our own grass-fed beef, and then we also raise lamb as well as some wool. So we have 130 ewes of about three or four different breeds, and then we finish 20 beef per year, approximately, with for both of those, an eye on looking on increasing both of those programs over the next few years.
Nice. And how long have you been at Carnation?
I started here in 2018, and so I've been here for a while.
Nice, nice, great. And Thomas, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Carnation.
Well, I got hired to build a butcher shop in our existing farm stand, and that butcher shop is designed to be a pipeline for the cattle and the lamb that we raise here, but also as a way to support local small farms and ranches in terms of sourcing poultry and pork from them. In the meantime, what I've been doing is supporting our culinary team and developing value-added products that I'll be introducing to the butcher shop once it opens up. So we're currently making pastrami. We're making, lamb pastrami and beef pastrami. We're doing Paris ham. We're doing bacon. Just not really reinventing the wheel at all. but just trying to get everybody used to seeing these value added products in our farm stand while we're gearing up to be able to source, 90% from our own farm.
Yeah, yeah. Man, that's the dream, I think, for most farmers is to be able to have a butcher on site and get that like direct pipeline, direct feedback. So, so excited for you all to have that. Um, Alex, tell us just a little bit about some of the specific breeds that you're working with before we kind of really dive into the butchery stuff here.
Yeah, so we have a couple unique breeds on the farm. So for sheep, our standard breeds that we raise are Katahdin hair sheep for just for lamb. But then I also have Finn and Romney sheep for fiber. And then I have a small herd, about 30, of a composite breed developed by a local farmer here who passed away last December. And they're called Avondales, and they're a BFL, Clune Forest, and Suffolk composite. Well, I guess they're not technically a composite breed with that many, but they're a breed that he developed specifically for grass-fed, finished organic lamb in the Snoqualmie Valley, which is where we are. So a really highly specified breed for our location. And then on the beef side, we raise a breed called Belted Kingshire, which is a true composite breed that Belted Galloway, Scottish Highland, Dexter, Lowline Hereford, and Lowline Angus. So they're, I would say like a mid, like a 3/4 size beef. They're not a true mini breed. And they were also specifically developed. Their name is Kingshire for King County, which is where we are. So another breed really highly specified to our area. And I do sort of have a focus on bringing in breeds that are like specific to our location or have been like kind of naturalized, I guess. Like a lot of the breeds that we have, I got from local farmers who have been raising their sheep in our area for, 10 to 15 years. So really focused on animals that will like thrive in our environment.
Yeah, I love that. I love how many of your breeds have names specific to your location too. That's unusual and very cool. Great. All right, Thomas, let's just start with kind of an open-ended question a little bit here. Can you just walk us through as a butcher, you've got a carcass on the table. What are you looking at in your like kind of first look at the meat? Are you in terms of like marbling, fat cover? Give us an idea of where your eyes go.
Well, feed finishing is really important to me. So I look at the color of the fat, to see if it's been grass fed, grass finished, if it has that golden yellow hue. Um, Definitely look at marbling, all right? Try to see, where it rates in terms of grading, if it was to be graded. And then I look at how long it's been aged, right? So if we're dry aging a whole carcass, I look at the desiccation that happens on the outside of it to see about how long it's been aged post slaughter. And then I generally break it into primals and continue to age it.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit what you mean by the desiccation part.
Well, so when you dry age, dry aging is kind of controlled decay, right? So right after slaughter, the animal after a couple hours is to go into rigor mortis, right? And then the enzymes that are still existing in those muscles will break down protein structures and relax those muscles, right? And that happens after about 3 or 4 days. But that enzymatic action keeps happening, right? And you can control that with temperature, humidity, and airflow. And that's a good thing because as the enzymes break down those protein structures, the meat gets more tender, but it also releases, what is it called? Sorry here. It's glutamate.
There's
So it just gives you a more beefy, umami, kind of mushroomy flavor, right? Glycogen, that's it. So,
there's so much jargon.
uh,
I can't believe you have any of these vocab words. There's a lot of butchery jargon. So
yeah. Well, and so when it's doing that, also the moisture kind of gets sucked out, and so the outside of the meat will dry out on you, right? And that's called desiccation. And it creates this hard shell around the meat, makes it really hard to cut through, but it also helps protect the meat from harmful bacteria because most harmful bacteria really like moisture, right? While at the same time, beneficial molds can grow on the outside of the meat, which also increase with this kind of nutty, cheesy, awesome flavor, right? all that being said is that's really great for big muscles. It's not so great for little muscles, right? So in my experience, I'm normally receiving carcasses that have been hung for about 3 weeks, and then I continue to hang them into the 46 to 52 range before I actually portion. In a perfect world, I'd get down there at 2 weeks and pull out the outside skirt steak, pull out the rose meat, just because those pieces are really small and the desiccation tends to get so much that your yield is really, really small on it, right? Plus, all that flavor gets packed in there again because it's a small muscle, right? So after 2 weeks, an outside skirt steak is going to be really tasty and beefy and tender and all that, right? Where something like a short loin or a rib roast, you need to take that into the 3, 4, 5, 6 week range to get that same kind of flavor profile and same kind of tenderness.
Hmm. Wow. And you were saying, when you're looking at the meat, that you can see some, or you're thinking about, and you can see some of the finishing process. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about grass finished versus grain finished? Can you actually tell, like, if you get a blind piece of meat on your table, can you tell whether it was grass finished or grain finished?
Yeah, grass finished, it's going to tend to be leaner, and it's going to have a golden or yellow hue to the fat. And that's because of something inside of the grass that I can't remember what it's called right now. But
Keratin, I think it is.
and when it comes to that, like, most cattle in the United States, they're kind of slaughtered in that 18 to 24 month range. And then, of course, if you're going past 30 months, you have to have all the SRMs removed. And that can make your yield really, really, that can mess with your yield quite a bit, depending on who's removing that.
Again, what the SRMs are?
What is it? That is the specified risk material. And
Okay.
so that's put in place to prevent prion diseases like mad cow disease from forming, right? And so those materials are things like the entire skull can't be used after 30 months, but more importantly, the entire spinal column can't be used, right? And so if you think about where, if you take a carcass and you split it, right along the inside ridge there, of your forequarter, that's the spinal column, right? And that's sitting up against your chuck, your rib, your strip loin, right? So all your big money cuts are hugged against the spine. If you're at a process, if you get it processed at a processing plant and they're using well saws, they're just going to kind of zip right down that line and they're not going to be very gentle about it. So they're going to cut right into all those big money cuts, right? And your yield is going to suffer because of that, right? There are ways around that, but generally speaking, it's not super cost effective to slaughter after 30 months. That being said, though, some of the best beef I've ever had is grass fed, grass finished 5, 6 year dairy cow,
Yeah.
And when it comes to the difference between grass fed and feed finished inherently is going to have more marbling. It's going to be fattier because, that grower can kind of change. The grower controls the amount of feed the animal's having. So the animal can get to slaughter weight faster and put on weight faster, right? But I still think grass fed is the better product. One for flavor, quality of life for the animal, but also if you can push that animal to 30 months or even past it and get the SRMs taken out in a way where it's not really cutting into your bottom line, you will get that level of marbling at some point.
Mm.
This all goes right back into dry aging though, because when you dry age, right, as you're dry aging, you're losing moisture, right? But those enzymes are also breaking down the collagen that surrounds the muscle fibers. So it's making everything tighter, right? Which is why when you get a large piece of meat, you dry age it, it looks like it's shrinking down. And because it is shrinking down, it's losing water weight. You lose between 15 and 30%. Again, that goes to the bottom line, but you get a better end product that way. It was something like grass fed that might have less marbling to begin with. As that muscle is shrinking in, it's shrinking into that intermuscular fat. So the marbling is going to actually be better.
Okay, that's perfect because I wanted to ask about marbling, and I know as a farmer, this is something I think about a lot as far as like what the time frame is for marbling, and how much does you know uh, how much does the type of forage that the animals are eating contribute to marbling? How much does it make a difference? if, let's say, you have a couple lean weeks in the summer when the forage is down and it's really dry, is that going to negatively impact the marbling in the final product? Can you just talk a little bit um, about what contributes to marbling?
Yeah, everything from the uterus. There's research that shows that there's stages of development in utero that actually affect how much that animal's meat is going to marble. So your nutrition from like day one is important. Now, not every week that that animal lives is going to be a stage at which that is impacted, but there are specific windows that will help your animal develop more marbling than other stages. I don't know off the top of my head what those are right now. I know that there's one in like late pregnancy. I know that around rumen development, so that's usually going to, this is for beef, around 6 months to like 8 months, kind of around when we'd think to wean calves, or when I would think to wean calves. There's another really important like rumen development stage, which will help them metabolize grasses better, which will translate to better marbling, to better fat cap, to all of these things. So like the unfortunate answer is like it all matters. But the good side of that is that like if you have 2 lean weeks in the summer where like it's really really stinking hot and your grasses all head out, and like it's probably not going to like destroy things for you if you've been mindful for the whole animal's like life cycle. So it's like a balance.
Wow, that's amazing to think that that starts in utero. So if you're really trying to prioritize marbling to like trying to you're potentially thinking about that even in terms of when you're breeding, when you're lambing, making sure that they're getting out on pasture and getting really good pasture when that rumen development or when each of those kind of developmental stages are happening.
Yeah, and like I can't remember off the top of my head, but like the specific window in pregnancy when like that takes place, it's like if it's wintertime and they're on like haylage or hay, like making sure they're getting like the best quality feed during that window. If you only have like, a third of your hay supply is your like top quality, like make sure that they're getting that then. Just to sort of help with the like full. And then so I said earlier do grass fed. We're not 100% grass fed. I do grass finished because we do supplement with grain during weaning for specifically rumen development, and we found that our animals are like healthier, grow faster, put on better weight, have better marbling, like all of the things sort of translate from that. So it's a couple weeks. I buy organic grain, and for me, it's totally worth having them be grass finished just to like help them through that challenging period of their life in terms of like supplemental nutrition.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how much, for either of you, how much can you all do kind of some detective work when you have the meat, after you butchered or when you're looking at it to say, like, Thomas, can you look at something and say, oh, I can tell that the farmer didn't do this or that they didn't have them out on, good pastures? How much can either of you kind of work backwards from the final product to the management decisions?
Well, I mean, outside of being able to tell what they were finished on based on fat color, there's not a lot that I can tell from a carcass outside, um, except for like trauma and abuse,
Mm.
right? If an animal goes through a lot of stress, whether it's chronic, 24 to 48 hours before slaughter, or whether it's acute, 6 hours to right at slaughter. There's some very telltale signs I can see there, whether it be bruising or dark, tough, dry meat or pale, kind of wet meat, right? And all that has to do with, when the animal gets really stressed out, all those stressor chemicals get dumped into their blood. So cortisol and adrenaline, and all that messes with their pH levels, right? And so those pH levels are going to affect how the meat turns out after slaughter. And what that kind of boils down to when it comes to, when it leaves my table or when it goes onto a plate, when it goes to a chef, right? All those stress levels mess with the glycogen inside of the muscles, right? Which is like their energy supply. And again, that glycogen is the thing that breaks down during the dry aging process. And the byproduct of that is, what is it? MSG, glutamate, right?
Mhm.
And so that's how you get these kind of really great beefy flavors. And if you ever taste a piece of beef that just tastes really bland and doesn't really taste like beef the way it should, more than likely that animal didn't have didn't have that energy supply in its muscles, right? And so that can't break down in the enzymatic reaction to get turned into glutamate to get to taste beefy and umami to us,
Wow.
right? But back to answer your question, yeah, if the meat is dark and dry, that is generally a sign of chronic stress. If it's really pale and wet, that's acute stress. And then, of course, any kind of ruptures or bruises, those are very self-evident, right?
Yeah.
And that just tells me that the animal uh, died a stressful death.
Yeah. And someone was asking, so when you say dark meat, you mean literally it looks darker than what you're used to seeing?
Yeah, DFD, dark, firm, and dry. Yeah.
Mm,
So it just, yeah, looks real dark.
yeah.
And I mean, and there are other factors to that. A lot of it goes around to just the pH level of the animal, right? Just because the meat is darker than what you might normally see doesn't necessarily mean DFD, right? Dark, firm, dry. It has to be all those things.
Yeah.
So if it's really firm to the touch, and it's not holding moisture at all, right? That's an indicator of stress.
Yeah. And what's the kind of appropriate level of stress? I mean, we all know that I work with sheep. They're going to be stressed a little bit just being moved one place to another or being trailered, even if they've, experienced it before. Is there kind of a point where it goes from a kind of normal level of stress, especially going to a processor, which is a completely different environment? We know that there's going to be some natural stress. How do you judge natural stress versus this kind of acute stress that you're talking about?
Well, I think Alex probably is more educated. It has more real life experience with this than I do, but using MSUs help mobile slaughter units, right? If they're buddies, don't split them up, right? Keep like animals with like animals. Don't slaughter hogs and sheep and cows all at the same time, right? Um, don't 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 have a lot of moving things around them, right? Just calm, simple environment. Do it slow, right? Um, yeah, do it the hard way, do it the expensive way,
Mhm.
and yeah, think about what would make it less stressful for you, right?
Yeah. Alex, can you talk a little bit about kind of your practices when you guys are taking animals to slaughter?
For sure. Um, yeah, I think like it's annoying. I'm like, as I'm hearing myself, it's like, oh, well, it starts with day one. Because it does, like so much of it does. Like for us, of course, we're not handling like every animal every day, but we lamb in a barn. And part of the reason we do lambing in the barn is so that we can have like a more intimate connection with the animals, have them familiar with us from the time they're little. And we spend a lot of time, maybe more time than others. It's not an outrageous amount of time, in my opinion, socializing them and having them be familiar with people and have them associate us with like going to fresh pasture. And, we're on 800 acres, which is a lot more than some other people have, but it's a big place. And we have to get the animals all around the property. And instead of like running them or herding them, we trailer them. And part of the reason we do that is also just to get them used to the trailer. And so at this point, most of our sheep, and I'd say about half of our cows, like they see the trailer coming and they're like, yeah, like they're so excited because they know they're either getting out of the elements or they're going to a fresh pasture. And so like we'll back, like sometimes it's annoying, like we back the trailer up and the sheep like won't get out, like they'll break out to get into the trailer. But ultimately, like that translates to like less transportation stress. And I would say, like, of course, there's always going to be some level of stress. Like flying down a highway in a tin can is never going to like feel good to anyone. But I think that choosing your processor, if you have options, like choosing your processor wisely, like makes a difference. I know that the processor that we go to now when I bring cows or sheep there, like they're a little like, they peek out of the trailer, like, what's going on? But then they kind of look around and they just like calmly step off the trailer and like calmly walk into the facility, and it's quiet and it's clean. And like I can tell that they're aware of being in a new place, which they're always going to be, but they're not like throwing themselves against the walls. They don't have their like big, wide, crazy eyes on. Like, I think there's little signs like that that sort of indicate like the handlers are quiet. They move quietly around the animals. They have handling systems that, the like walls curve, they're solid walls. It's like, all of these Temple Grandin sort of practices and ways of constructing that just improve the experience for the animals. And then of course, if you can have on-farm harvest, like that's going to be the least stressful of anything. Like they're in a familiar place, they're with their familiar handlers, they don't have to get in a trailer. Usually it happens early in the morning, so it's like, it's cool. So most of what we've done has been custom exempt on-farm processing. So like direct to customer, they buy a share of the animal. And it's only recently that we've started bringing animals to a processing plant, partly because we didn't have a ton of options near us, and also partly just because like I had enough customers that I could do that. And I was like, why stress them out if I don't have to? And now it's really important to us to be able to like move product to Thomas and move product to the farm stand. And we want to grow enough that we sort of have outgrown that. So I think selecting the processor like makes a big difference. And if you're getting meat back that's like pale and watery, then like take someone else.
Yep. And can you guys, I'm interested to hear from both of you a little bit about muscle development. How much does exercise or movement or, an animal that's maybe in one place and stationary for, either that finishing time or for the majority of its life, how much does that meat differ from an animal that's rotating a lot, is super active? Can you talk a little bit about that muscle development?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of importance put on marbling and a lot of importance put on fat, right? And so I think there might be this idea that a docile animal or a solitary or an animal that doesn't move or get a lot of exercise is going to produce a better end product. And I don't think that's true at all. The more an animal moves, the more blood gets pumped through that muscle, right? So the more glycogen gets pumped through that muscle, right? These are good chemicals, good hormones, right? We want those muscles to be active and to be used, right? It also makes it a lot easier on my end when I'm seaming out muscles, right? So for me, when I get a larger carcass, like if I have a carcass whose hanging weight is in the 600 range, right? And again, pretend they're the same breed, right? There's a big difference between 600-pound hanging weight, 800-pound hanging weight, and an 1,100-pound hanging weight, right? Working with all of those, right? And what I have found is, in terms of butchering, the larger animals take a little bit more strength, but it's easier to seam and easier to find your muscles, and and in terms of at the end on the plate, those larger animals taste a lot better. They're beefier. There's more umami. There's more subtlety and flavor. And I think, again, that goes right to those muscles being used more. The more they're used, there's more glycogen. That glycogen gets converted into glutamate, so on and so on and so on. And again, that all again goes right back to aging properly, right? So yeah, dry aging is really like that's the key. If you really want to honor the animal and of course use all of it, don't waste any of it. Nothing goes in the trash, right? But if you really want that end product to be the best it can be, eat the 25% water loss, dry age.
Mm. And Alex, do you think much about kind of that muscle development in your management practices? I know you all, rotationally graze. Is that something that factors into your considerations when you're managing?
I don't think it did initially. I
Yeah.
think that initially especially when I first started out here, we were doing more poultry than ruminants, and it's only been in the last like 3 or 4 years that we've really like doubled down on the ruminant train. And I think that initially it was just like my priorities were the health of the animals, the welfare of the animals, the health of the pasture, the health of the soil. But like all those things, but like you'll find that a lot of those things also translate to a better end product, because like a happier, healthier animal, like a healthy animal is just always going to taste better than an unhealthy one. It just is. And like it'll have more complex flavor and more like well-developed flavors. And I think that so I don't think it was initially, but I think I have learned that it does have an impact and that it's like worth prioritizing also from a meat quality standpoint.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that almost like animals are kind of like wine where they have terroir, right?
Mhm.
They're gonna take on the flavors of what they're raised with and grown with, right? And I think that's a benefit, not a detriment, right? Beef here in the Pacific Northwest should have a different flavor profile than beef raised in the South or in the middle of the country or in the East. And again, that's a positive, not a negative.
yeah, absolutely. We love that hyper specific local flavor. Um, and so I was going to ask too, kind of along those lines, how much does forage? This is such a big kind of question to get into, but how much does forage play into flavor and texture and all the things that you're looking at, marbling? Are there specific species that you're looking at having in your pastures to improve the quality of the meat, or are you just looking for diversity in the pastures? What are some things you think about when it comes to the forage that they're eating?
Um, like all of the things that you just said are things that
Yeah,
I think about.
all
I
of
think that, yeah,
it.
so right now we're mostly like working with what we've got. I'm not spending a ton of money or time like seeding new things into pastures. Like we did a little bit of that last year with like varying degrees of success. And it was sort of like, well, let's see how much we can work with all the different varieties of things that we already have here,
Yeah.
and then like be really thoughtful about like how we introduce um, new species and different forages. So on our farm, we have like two kind of distinct microclimates. We have one big pasture in the lowlands, which is like right on the valley floor. It backs right up to the Snoqualmie River. And then on the property, there's a big ridge, and we have this like 100 acres of upland pasture that is a lot rockier, and it's very quick draining, and it gets hotter up there, like quite a bit hotter. And then our lowland pasture is kind of more silty and clayey and stays wet a lot longer. And so there's a lot of species that we have in both places, but the way that those plants express themselves in the different parts of the year is very different. Like our lowland pasture stays very lush and regrows, even now it's 90 degrees out, and we have species down here that are like regrowing out of like just the moisture that's staying in the ground. So they're still in that like phase 2 vegetative growth, whereas like most of our upland forage has like kind of headed out, and we're just using it as maintenance ration for the ewes, which is great for them. So, but we want the finishing animals and like our weaned lambs like down on this really nice lush pasture. So we have like a lot of ryegrass. We have canary wheatgrass, which is like everyone hates, but can actually, especially in times like right now where we have moisture in the ground but not a lot of rainfall, it's growing, and it's a great forage for the cows. They eat it, they love it, especially when it's in that like early stage of growth. So like we're working with what we have, and finishing cows. We did find that we brought the cows down into this lowland pasture for the first time last year. They'd mostly just been using it for hay, and we definitely had a better quality meat. Like it was sweeter and kind of less like, not gamey, but we have a unique breed, and it's grass finished, and it's more complex.
Yeah.
But I think that like we definitely noticed a difference, and also just a difference in like their weight gains, and they filled out a lot faster. And like our calves from last year that grazed on the lowland pasture are almost as big as the calves from 2 years ago, the now finishing cows from 2 years ago that were raised on the upland pasture. So it's like largely the same species. We have some clovers, we have ryegrass, we have quackgrass, we have the canary grass. You know, there's plantain, there's dandelion. Like all of this stuff is in both places, but you know, it expresses itself differently at different times of year. And then we also have inside the garden, we have a herd of elk that lives here on the farm and they never leave. So we have 15 acres and a elk fence for like vegetable production, and they cover crop. They use about a quarter of that every year, and then they cover crop the other 3 quarters. So those cover crops are usually, they're always a species that the animals can all eat, and we prioritize like high sugar grasses. So we like finish our animals that are close to finishing, we like push into these like nicer high grass cover crop areas, so then they do some fertilization while they're in there, and they also like get this extra boost of sugar.
Yeah, and that was actually another question that I was going to ask is kind of is how what you're finishing them on impacts that meat quality. I know, some folks like to finish when when the grasses have the most sugar in them, if they can finish in the spring or late spring, but other folks by necessity have to finish in the fall or late fall when the grasses have less sugar, or they may even be feeding hay. How much do you see that impacting the meat?
I think it impacts meat quality, and also like I have to make decisions that work with my system. So I do harvest some beef in the spring after they've been out on pasture for like a month to 2 months is like kind of my ideal after that like nice spring flush. And then I do a fall harvest or like a late summer harvest, which sometimes gets pushed to like a midsummer harvest, but it's, you know, the butchers have the availability that they have. The animals are done when they're done. And so, but I think it does, I mean, it does impact the meat quality for sure. I think it takes longer than some people think. Like if you put an animal on a high sugar grass for 2 weeks before they're slaughtered, like I don't think that it'll make that much of a difference. It's more like 2 months,
Mm,
like to really have like a deep impact. But it definitely makes a difference.
yeah. Uh, and how much do you think the consumer is clocking those differences? Like, have you all done taste tests between maybe your meat and another place, or your fall harvest versus your spring harvest? I know that's something that I'm always curious about is, I think consumers have kind of a gut reaction to their meat, but may not know exactly what's going on or why. How much do you think that translates to the average person versus those of us who are getting very have a really refined palate kind of for the variations of meat?
You want to answer that, Thomas? I feel like you interact more with the customer and that I do.
I think people know when they eat something that they really like, right? But I think that uh, to go back to comparing it with wine, right? If you're giving somebody a glass of wine and you want them to taste it, if you want it to be a certain thing, tell them it tastes like whatever. Be like, this tastes like blueberries. You taste those blueberries? You taste that plum in there? They're gonna say,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it tastes like blueberries and plum. That's great because you put that idea in their head, right?
Yeah.
Meat's kind of the same thing. If you're like, oh, you taste the subtle sweetness here because we finished it, on alfalfa, at this time of year, that kind of thing, right? I think what's more important is to teach them about exactly what Alex was just talking about. Talk more about how you're part of a polyculture, not a monoculture, and talk about how none of this is instant gratification. These are living animals, and this is a system that is very, very malleable. Um, and try to tell them that scarcity is a good thing, and needing to wait for this product to be the best that it can be. This animal has to be born, it has to grow, it has to be fed, it has to be finished, it has to be slaughtered, then it has to be dry aged, and then it has to be butchered, and then it has to be cooked, right? So, I mean, to answer your question shortly, no, you know, but you tell them that story, then yes, right? Then they're going to taste the difference
Yeah.
because you told them the story, right? And you're not doing it in a way that's misleading or malicious. You're just doing it in a way that kind of paints a bigger picture. and gives them more respect for the entire process, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect answer. And I also wonder sometimes, when we're selling our meat to our customers, Alex, you were saying sometimes you finish your cattle in the spring, sometimes you finish in the fall. Do you think the customers are clocking like they get carnation meat and they're like, wait, this tastes different than it did before? Is it more kind of we know the subtleties of those differences in qualities, but the customers still, because they're getting a great animal from you, they're still getting a great experience regardless?
Our customers buy meat when they're out of meat. They don't
Yeah,
really care what time of year it comes from.
yeah.
I have customers. So we bought these cows in 2021, and I have customers. So I bought the whole herd from some farmers up the road that were ready to retire, and I have customers still to this day that were customers of theirs for 5, 6, 7 years. Like the people keep coming back because like they care about the breed, they care about the farmers. The meat is good, it's delicious, but it's like it's the whole picture, I think, and I think that that's especially for our customers, like that's more important to them than like, oh, it was finished in the spring on that lush grass, you know. Because I think there's nuance for sure, but I think there's also consistency. There's more consistency than there's nuance, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And we have a couple questions in the chat here. Let's see. Katrina was asking. She said Angus has an excellent marketing program, so the perception is that Angus is the meat choice. Wagyu is beginning to be a marketing contender. Is there a consistently high quality breed across climates for either of you?
A consistently high quality breed across climates. Like, do they do well in different regions?
Mm.
I would say that it's interesting. We thought about crossing Wagyu into the Kingshire cross because it's a relatively new developed breed and we can kind of make it whatever we want it to be. And my on-farm custom exempt butcher, who I have a really great relationship with, I told him that and he was like, don't you do that. Don't you dare do that. Wagyu take way longer to finish. They're a smaller framed cow. You don't want to be crossing a smaller framed beef into this already 3/4 size beef. And it's going to take you way longer to finish with a Wagyu. So like, I think that it's definitely marketing wise, I think people are excited about Wagyu. And I also think that like we used to do contract grazing here for a farm up in Skagit, and they have Angus Wagyu cross, and it does so well for them. They have like built their business on it, and they've been in business for a long time, and they're very successful. So I think it just depends on like what you want out of your animals and what your customers are looking for. In terms of like breeds across different climates, I think that a lot of breeds, both beef and sheep, are like highly adaptable. Like they'll adapt to the climate that they're in eventually, but it will take you several generations to like find the animals, the specific individuals that really thrive in your climate, which is like when I focus on bringing in new stock, I'm looking at farmers around me who have high quality animals that are like kind of already adapted to the climate so that I don't have to eat the loss of like a 25% cull over the first few years for the animals that just aren't thriving. I hope that answers your question, Katrina.
I think using the word marketing is hitting the nail on the head there. I think that you can customize the end product based on how the animal is raised, how it's fed, when it's slaughtered, all those factors. They're not really looking for Angus, they're not really looking for Wagyu. What they're looking for is what they've been marketed, right? So in the case of Wagyu, they're looking for something that's heavily marbled, right? And in the case of Angus, they're looking for something that is reliable and consistent, right? And we can give them those things that even if they're not Angus, even if they're not Wagyu, right? You could have a Limousine or a Charlet or, in our case, a belted Kingshire and have a very similar product. The hurdle is you have to be able to have the conversation. So that's kind of that's my role. I'm face to face, over the counter, right? Somebody comes in, they say, I want Wagyu, right? That's great. I don't have Wagyu. Why do you want Wagyu? Right? Do you want it because you've heard about it, because it's expensive and prestige, Or do you want it because it's high in fat and high in marbling, right? Well, I have that for you. Here's a Denver steak cut from our animals, right? Or here's a boneless short rib, right? Those are both cuts that are going to be really tightly marbled almost all the time, regardless. So I think it's just having a conversation. The answer no, it's not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of the conversation, right? And scarcity, again, is part of sustainability. So you don't always get exactly what you want, and that's a good thing. And you don't get instant gratification, and that's a good thing. But you have to have a conversation about it.
Yeah. And Carrie Stevens asks, do you see a difference in yield depending on the time of year that the animals are harvested?
I
Like,
personally don't. Yeah.
yeah, you don't. I would say like maybe moderately, but mostly no. Like we prioritize harvesting animals that are like finished, that are like ready to be harvested. So I would say that, like, I mean, usually we harvest steers in the spring and heifers in the fall because the steers just size up more quickly. But they end up both being relatively the same carcass yield, because we give the heifers a little bit of extra time to size up. So I don't particularly notice much of a difference, but that might also just be because of our management practices and like how we decide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Candace asked a question about grass-fed fat. Does the yellow tint only apply to beef?
No, no, you'll see that the yellow tint is really, really apparent in the beef, that's for sure. But you'll see that on lamb too. You see a little yellow and golden tinge to it.
And poultry, sometimes
Yeah, and
poultry.
poultry for sure. Yeah, but I mean, it really should be their diet should be as diverse as the land that they're raised on. Again, polyculture, not monoculture. But yeah, short answer, yes, you can see that color.
Nice. We have this hour has gone by so fast. We have just a few minutes left, so feel free to drop any burning questions in the chat so we make sure to get to them. Tom, hi Tom. Tom Wheatley from Utah Meat Collective just asked, do you decide harvest based on age? If so, what age are you targeting? Great question.
It's a great question. So right now with the Kingshires and the way that the breeding program has been, we've been like from age, it's been like 20 to 24 months is kind of like our target range. I'm working on like getting that to be a slightly shorter window. Like if we could finish some at 18 months and some at 24, that would be great. Just from a like, I care about quality, I care about the animal's life, I care about the pasture. Like all of those things are my kind of top priorities, but like my margins have to be a priority too, right? Like my bottom line also has to make sense. So if I can get some animals to market a little bit sooner and some kind of stay in that 20 to 24 month range, that will sort of just like help smooth everything out a little bit. We're also going to be bringing in some shorthorns that typically finish in 18 months. So maybe I'll leave the Kingshires in that 20 to 24 month range, and then the shorthorns I'll finish a little faster just so we can like get a little bit more turnaround.
I've got a question if you all don't mind. Do you keep records on your carcass evaluation? And this question kind of goes for both of you. And do you come together through those records at all, or how does that relationship kind of happen?
Well, I guess that's something that we are starting, and I think that's something we should absolutely do. Of course, we have lot numbers that we can refer back to. For me, in order to track my yields, I won't do this for every carcass, but I'll set a standard. So, I'll start from a hanging weight and then weigh everything that I'm processing and record all of that, right? And what I should be doing is making notes as well. Notes on marbling, notes on flavor profile, things I like, things I don't like, right? And then having a conversation with Alex about that, and something that we're starting. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say so the custom exempt butcher that I work with that comes and does processing on farm, I've been working with him for 5 or 6 years now. So we have a close relationship. We have a really friendly relationship. And he is a guy that like doesn't pull punches and is very, very honest. So when he butchers, I ask him like, hey, like, what do you think of like what you're seeing? It's more of a visual evaluation, and I don't really document it, but I sort of like I keep things in my head that the feedback that he gives me, and like he was the one that was like, don't you dare cross Wagyu into this. This is a really nice. This is nice how it is, and like you're doing a really good job. So I have sort of like informally sort of like kept tabs on that, but especially from like taste evaluation for so long, my whole program was all custom exempt. So I didn't really get cuts to taste and compare. So it's only now just that we're like starting this USDA thing. Thomas is working on like we're starting a lot of stuff up right now. So I think we're both really excited to like have that conversation and like be in development on like keeping records and evaluating and knowing like, well, all these animals that were harvested in the spring like have way better yields. Like I think that information is just something that I haven't really had access to for a long time. And so I think I'm definitely looking forward to doing that.
Yeah.
You know, from a culinary standpoint too, you know, we're really lucky here. We have a whole culinary team. You know, we have multiple kitchens we get to work in. And so I think we can definitely fit it into the budget where, you know, every carcass we're going to take, you know, one standard cut, cook it, taste it, eat it, you know, all eat together, right? And have those as part of the notes as well.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of farmers and butchers are kind of like bootstrapping and so like might not have the time to dedicate towards written records and then comparing them. So it's nice to hear that, you know, that's not necessarily where you need to start, but if you can have that capacity to kind of add that in, that's ideal.
Well,
And if
this
you
is
can develop, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I was just gonna say we kind of have that luxury, right?
Mhm.
Because you know, I started here the first of the year. So, you know, us working together and building this program together is relatively new. But, you know, we're doing it here and we're doing it with the support of y'all. And, you know, like we have the opportunity to kind of do these things that would be harder to do if we were farther along, but we're starting together. So it's a luxury.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like your butcher and the people who harvest your meat, like those are people that see a lot of meat. A lot of meat passes through their hands. So like if you're looking for objective, even just a visual assessment, like that's a really good person to ask. Especially if you can tell them like, please be honest. I don't want you to sugarcoat things for me. Tell me honestly, like what your assessment is of like what I'm doing. Because chances are they'll have some pretty good like feedback for you.
Do you have any advice too for folks who, you know, I know for me, my on-farm mobile processor, I can chat with them, but I don't get a lot of FaceTime with my butcher. And I'm always a little hesitant, like, do I kind of push my way in when I know they're super busy and overworked? Do you have any advice for folks who may not get a lot of FaceTime with their actual butcher to get some of that feedback?
Yeah, that's harder. Again, like, yeah, the person that comes on site, like we chat and, you know, they're working and we have just more of a face-to-face relationship. Part of the reason I'm so excited that Thomas is here is that like I do have someone that I have more of a face-to-face relationship with that's like on that butcher side. Because I've had similar problems with my like USDA processing plant staff is that like they're always putting out fires. They're always so busy. They're always so stressed out. And so it like, so much of the interactions happen like over the phone or on email or like quickly here and there. So I've also kind of struggled to get feedback from those places. I think that like the longer that you're a customer and the more you sort of like ingratiate yourself, like be a good customer, like get your cut sheets in on time, pay your invoices promptly, like be a good customer so that you can like ingratiate yourself to these people and they'll be a little bit more willing to like stop and talk to you for a minute. That's kind of like the best advice I have. I don't know, Thomas, you might have some insight.
Well, not on so much like getting feedback on the quality of the carcass, but I would say on my end of things, you know, there's so much nomenclature around different cuts of meat, right? And not everybody knows the Latin of all these different muscle groups, right? So I would say if you're speaking to a butcher, if you're speaking to cut and wrap, use the NAMP guide, use NAMP numbers, right? Because that's going to be the standard language that we all share. right? So if I'm not getting a full carcass, but I have to get in, a subprimal or a specific cut, I'm gonna ask for it by the NAMP number because I need it to be cut a certain way and I need to know how that's gonna be, right? So I'm not gonna ask for a rib roast, I'm gonna ask for a 107. I'm not gonna ask for a brisket, and I'm gonna ask for a 120, that kind of thing. And so just again so we're all talking the same language. The NAMP guide is great. Use the NAMP guide.
Oh, great. I hadn't thought about that. That's a great piece of advice. And Joni had a good note here. She said, I write so many notes on my cut sheet. They're busy and may not remember a conversation. I highlight the comments in yellow so they don't just glance over. It works great for us. Thanks for that tip, Joni. And then I'm going to squeeze in one last question from a attendee here. Candace asked, is dry aging important for mutton/lamb?
So lamb, you're going to go a little less, right? Lamb, I'd say the sweet spot's like in that 2 week range, right? You have to think about the size of the carcass when it comes to that, and how much desiccation, how much the outside is going to dry up, right? Also, both lamb and mutton have much more intense flavor profiles than beef, right? With mutton, though, mutton you should absolutely age to that 3 to 4 week range. I think that would be about the sweet spot for mutton, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
And yeah, it's going to do the same thing. It's just going to make it taste lambier, more umami.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we're just getting started. I think we could go for another hour. I know there's more questions, but I also want to respect people's time. So we got to wrap up here. I want to ask just one last question, which is if you guys can tell us just a little bit about what's coming up at Carnation, and kind of tacking on to that, would you recommend farmers try and get to a butchery class if they haven't before? If you
Mhm.
can answer those questions to wrap us up.
Uh, I think everyone should go to a butchery class. Farmers, especially, it's important to know where your hard work is going, right? And for a regular consumer, I think it's important to understand how much work goes into taking the life of this animal and turning it into food, right? It's a respect thing. And you have to be able to embrace the slaughter. And if you can't, then you shouldn't eat meat. Um, in terms of what we're doing here at the farm, we've been pushing pop-ups down at the farm stand. So on Saturdays, we kind of just put something out there, to get people excited. And lately, we've been doing smash burgers with Alex's beef. And I can say without ego, it is fantastic. It's a great product, super, super tasty. And if you guys are in the Pacific Northwest, please come by and see us. Let us feed you. Let us give you a farm tour.
I have a small list of things that we're doing also, just as I can rattle stuff off if anyone's relatively local. I think these are almost all in person. So we have farm dinners July 19th and August 9th. So those are on farm to table dinners. We're doing a barn dance on August 2nd. We have a meet and greet on September 13th. So we developed these, they're MEAT and greet. And we invite customers, potential customers, current customers to come out to the farm, meet the farmer, meet the animal. And it's a great way to build interest in our custom exempt program. We're teaching a rotational grazing workshop. We have the part 3 of that on September 15th, but they're all standalone, so you can come to one or all 3. Harvest market is October 11th. Thomas is doing the pasture plate beef workshop on November 1st. If you are relatively local and want to take a beef cutting workshop, that's cutting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on November 1st. You can do it. Thomas is doing pop-ups all the time. They're amazing. We have a whole farm stand full of amazing products, and there's so much more. And I can put a link in the chat for events if people are interested in more information.
Yeah, so many cool things going on. If anyone's in the Pacific Northwest, what a great resource. And we'll share these links in a follow-up email. I know we're a tiny bit over time, so we'll wrap up with just a few last things. Like I said, we'll send a follow-up email to everyone who registered with a link to be able to watch this back on YouTube if you missed any part, and links to resources that we mentioned. And then Meredith, if you want to just share our slide deck real quick, I have 2 quick things to mention. If you are not already on our Good Meat Finder, you should be. It's free. It takes about 4.5 minutes to fill out. And this is not just farms. This is also butcher shops, retail, restaurants. and it encompasses a wide range of values-based practices. So it's a great chance to showcase the values and the amazing practices that you have. So please get on the Good Meat Finder if you're not on there already. And lastly, we're able to offer these lowdowns free of charge thanks to generous donations. We're a nonprofit. So if you want to take the next step in promoting this or in supporting us, if you found this lowdown helpful at all, we appreciate donation, large or small, every dollar counts. And Meredith is dropping that link in the chat as well. And with that, we're going to wrap up this lowdown. We are planning to have quite a few more lowdowns in the fall, specifically around butchery education. So please keep an eye on your emails and your social media. We'll be announcing more of those soon. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Alex. We so appreciate your time and expertise and hope to do this again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.